Welcome. Yeah, let's get into it. Today we're going to be talking about clouds, iClouds, Google Cloud, Amazon Cloud, every cloud out there. So let's go ahead and hop on into it. Cloud storage, digital memory, and institutional preservation. Have you ever wondered where your memories really live? Chances are they're not in a dusty attic or a shoebox under the bed. They're in the cloud. For family photos and personal emails to university records and government archives. Our lives are increasingly stored as digital data on remote servers. In fact, this year, it's estimated that around half the world's data will be stored in the cloud. Think about that. Half of everything we've collectively known and know and to be known, documents, pictures, videos, records, drifting that invisible data space we call the cloud. Now, this isn't some metaphor. When we say the cloud, we mean real physical data centers distributed across the globe. But to us, the users, it feels almost magical. We snap a photo on our phone, and seconds later, it's safe in the iCloud, in Google Photos, ready to be pulled back down whenever we want to reminisce. Our digital memory has been interwoven within cloud services. And it's not just individuals like you and me, libraries, archives, museums, institutions, tasked with preservation of our collective memory, are also turning to cloud storage to safeguard history. This raises a host of questions. How does cloud storage change the way we remember? Can we trust these institutions to preserve our stories for future generations? And what happens if the keeper of our digital memory, whether big tech companies or archival institutions, falter and disagree on what should be saved? In this podcast, I'll take you through the intersections of cloud storage, digital memory, and institutional preservation. We'll keep it conversational and engaging, as if we're just chatting about an intriguing issue, because it truly is one, except a few rhetorical questions, some pauses, and I want to hear your feedback as well. After all, we're talking about memory, something deeply personal and fundamentally human, and how it's being transformed in the digital age. So get comfortable, or keep doing whatever you're doing, and let's dive in. Imagine scrolling through your cloud backups in 30 years. What will you find? And will you even be able to open it? Let's start unraveling that puzzle. The cloud, our new digital attic. Let's start with cloud storage itself. What is the cloud? Really, simply put, it's a network of servers and data centers that store data and make it accessible online. Instead of keeping files on your local computer or in physical archives, you send them to these remote servers. When you need them, you pull them back down. It's like having an attic or basement or storage just somewhere on the internet where all your stuff is kept. Except this attic is distributed across continents and professionally maintained. Every day, billions of people use cloud storage without a second thought. When you upload photos of Instagram, save documents in Google Drives, or stream music for Spotify, you're relying on cloud storage. We've gotten used to this convenience, but it's worth pausing and asking, what does it mean for our memories when they live in the cloud? Picture this. Your grandfather's old letters and photos might fade in a box somewhere, but your emails and selfies, your digital letters and photos could effectively live forever on a server. That's if everything goes right. The cloud gives us a huge advantage when it comes to preservation. It copies our data to multiple places automatically, protecting it with encryption, and keeps it on hardware that's monitored 24/7. In theory, this means that your digital files can be safer in the cloud than on a single hard drive in your closet. One spilled coffee on a hardware crash, and that hard drive is toast. But clouds providers have backups on backups. Many archives recognize this benefit. Cloud services can replicate data across several distinct locations and perform regular integrating oh my goodness, checks, making this the basic preservation. Integrity checks, making the basic bit preservation. Keeping the raw data organizations or local museums with tight budgets use cloud storage can be cheaper and easier than building their own data centers. Instead of investing in physical infrastructure, they can rent exactly what they need on the cloud and scale it up as their collection grows, much like you do. That flexibility is a game changer, especially under financial pressure. So the cloud can be like a dream come true for preservation, endless space, constant backups, and accessibility from anywhere. Sounds perfect, right? Well, not so fast. There are some serious caveats to keep in mind that keep archivists up at night. Let's talk about a few of those by weighing pros and cons more explicitly. Pros of cloud preservation: automatic backups and redundancy. Cloud storage isn't just on a single drive in one location. Your data is often stored in multiple data centers at once, sometimes scattered across different regions. This means if one center has an outrage or even a disaster or outage, your files are still safe everywhere else. For an archivist, that kind of built-in geopostal redundancy is gold. It's like having duplicates of an invaluable manuscript locked in a vault in different continents. Scalability and convenience. Need more storage? With the cloud, it's often as easy as just one click, upgrade. You don't have to construct a new building or even wire up new servers in-house. Institutions can scale their storage up or down on demand, elasticity, and pay for what they use. This on-tap nature of cloud service allows even smaller archives to store large digital collections without massive upfront costs. Managed maintenance. These cloud providers handle all the dirty work: hardware failures, disk replacement, software updates. For memory institution like archives, this means outsourcing a lot of the IT headaches. Instead of worrying about whether our hard drives in the basement would die, they let Google, Amazon, Microsoft, or any other specialized preservation cloud company handle that. Ideally, this frees up librarians and archivists to focus on what to preserve rather than how to keep the machines running. Cons of the cloud. Long-term uncertainty. Here's a fundamental tension. The cloud is built for a quick, flexible service, but archives think in decades or centuries. Tech companies come and go. Policies change. An archive can't be sure a cloud provider will exist in 50 years or that the data they store will remain in a readable format. As this digital preservation handbook bluntly puts it, the cloud is designed for flexibility and rapid change. Archives, however, are long-term. The data we entrust on the cloud today must outlive any one company and technology. That requires careful planning. What if our provider shut down or suddenly hike prices? Exit strategies like periodically pulling copies into another storage or keeping an independent backup is a must. Cost and budgeting challenges. While the cloud can be cost effective, it has a pay-as-you-go model for institutions used to one-time capital expenditures. The monthly bill for cloud storage can be tricky. The usage can also spike unpredictably. If many users suddenly want to download data, gross fees charged for data leaving the cloud might surge. It's not a straightforward to budget for, say, 20 terabytes of archive for the next 10 years. Because costs might change, this can make financial officers uneasy. Control, privacy, and legal issues. When you store data on someone else's server, you inevitably face questions of control. Who owns the data in the eyes of the law? Do you fully own it? Or does the cloud provider have some right to it? What if they scan it or use it for their own purposes? Archivists also have to worry about privacy law, especially if the data includes personal information. There are copyright questions too. Archives might have collections with complicated ownership, and uploading them to a cloud might technically breach some licenses if not carefully managed. Moreover, cloud providers often have standard contracts that aren't easily changed for individual customers. This means an archive might have to agree to terms that aren't ideal for preservation. like limits of liability, or unclear responsibility for data security. All these legal and ethical considerations might make cloud adoption far from a no-brainer for institutions dedicated to preserving information. Security concerns. Handling your data to a cloud means you have to trust the provider's security. Major breaches do happen. If an archive's cloud storage is hacked, sensitive historical records or personal data could be leaked. Also, simply the fact that the data is online introduces risk. Archives traditionally like the idea of dark archives, data locked away, not accessible to hackers. Cloud flips that towards availability, which is great for access, but means constantly guarding against cyber threats. I didn't bring up the downsides of this to scare anyone away from the cloud, rather than show you what it means when it comes to preserving memory. Caution is key. Many archives are proceeding carefully, conducting pilot projects and learning from early adapters, and encouraging some pioneers have shown that it could work. Several archives have addressed common cloud computing concerns and successfully integrated cloud storage into their digital preservation workflow. The key is treating cloud storage like any other tool with proper risk management, backup plans, and clear rules. In other words, use the cloud but keep an eye on the sky for storms. Digital memory, so much data, so little context. So in this second part, we're going to shift from technology to the concept of digital memory itself. By digital memory, I mean the sum of all information we're saving in digital form. Everything from tweets and TikTok videos to government documents and scientific data sets. It's the collective diary of humanity in the digital age. One might assume that with an advent of cloud storage and digital everything, our historical records will be more compliant than ever. After all, we're not limited by what paper can survive or what photos don't decay. We're capturing everything, aren't we? Here's the paradox. Having more data doesn't automatically mean having a truthful or coherent story of the past. In fact, researchers have noted a counterintuitive twist. A more extensive digital historical record can offer greater opportunity to misrepresent reality. This sounds odd at first. How could more evidence lead to more distortion? Think of it this way. In a sea of information, it's easy to cherry pick facts or images that can fit a false narrative. People do it all the time. Context can get lost. Digital data can amazingly decontextualize a photo, or a quote can spread without the circumstance that gave it meaning. Let's for a second take a break and imagine future historians try to understand our time. They have billions of social media posts, videos, and messages. But if those items are floating free without context on who created them and why, one could construct completely different interpretations of the year 2020, say by selecting different slices of data, then changing the context, preservations, and integrity data records, making them fragile. A tweet by a bot might be indistinguishable from one by a real eyewitness unless you know how to interpret metadata. A digital ultra photo might survive longer online than the original, obscuring the truth. In short, digital preservation has brought new challenges, ensuring authenticity so we know a file is what it is and claims to be, maintaining provenance, keeping track of where this digital item came from and who handles it, and preserving completeness so we don't just save pieces of something and later find the rest is missing. Let's add a human touch. Think about your own digital footprint. If someone in the future only saw your Instagram photos, would they truly know you? What if they only read your work emails but not your personal texts? Would they misunderstand your life? On a societal scale, this is the problem archivists face. How to preserve the story around digital artifacts, not just the artifacts themselves. A single Facebook post about a protest might be less useful without the comments, the linked archives, or knowledge of the event is described. But saving everything is impossible or impractical, and even if we tried, we could drown in irrelevant data. So there's a careful curation needed even in the cloud era. All this means that institutions responsible for preservation must think not just about storing data, but about preserving meaning. They are increasingly grappling with questions like how do we capture context? How do we ensure future users can interpret this data correctly? It could be as simple as saving an explanatory note with a photo, or as complex as preserving the code of an old software so future researchers can run it to see what a data set means. It's a lot, and it's very different from the old days of just keeping a book on the shelf. So, in this next section, the third part of our podcast, we're going to talk about whose memory gets preserved, personal versus institutional. Now, let's talk about who is doing the preserving, because not all digital memory is treated equally. There's a big difference between personal preservation and institutional preservation. On a personal level, each of us might choose to save a certain thing. You might back up a photo and emails, maybe keep an external hard drive of important documents to maintain a personal blog of your entire life events. This is your personal digital archive. Essentially your own memory storage. Millions of people do this, often unconsciously. Like when your photo auto backups all of your pictures on your phone. On the other hand, we have institutional preservation. That is what libraries, archives, museums, and other organizations do deliberately. They decide what part of the collective digital life to save for prosperity. This could include government records, historical news, websites, digital art, scientific data sets, and etc. As we talked about earlier, institutional preservation is guided by policies and expertise. Archivists decide what historical significance and how to catalog it and how to keep it accessible over time. Personal and institutional preservations don't always align. There's way more digital content out there than any institution could ever save. And a lot of what individuals care about, you and me, our families, might not be collected by any official archives. Conversely, institutionals might preserve things that the public doesn't actively think about, like obscure government databases or the raw footage of news broadcasts. Another dimension to this is ownership and access. If my diary is on a cloud service, technically I'm preserving it, but no one else can access it unless I allow it, unless the service has a data breach. But that's a negative form of access. Institutions strive to preserve and provide access of material for the public or researchers. So this is a dance here. Sometimes institutions will reach out to individuals and communities and say, hey, that collection or forum or fan fiction you built is culturally important. Can we archive it for the future historians? Other times, individuals will donate their digital archives to libraries, like an author giving their email and drafts to a university library. But what about all the stuff that falls through the cracks? We live in a time where huge swaths of content and creators create outside of traditional institutions. Think of independent bloggers, social media influencers, grassroots movements, organizations on Twitter or Telegram. Who is saving these outputs? The question leads us to the idea of outsiders, digital collections. So the unofficial historians, not everything valuable gets the stamp of a library or archive. In fact, some of the most fascinating and cultural significant digital material live in what we might call outsiders' archive. Collections maintained by enthusiasts, archivists, or communities that are outside of traditional institutions. Sometimes they're outsiders by choice or necessity. Maybe these creators distrust official institutions, or maybe no official archive recognize the value of the material that they're preserving. Other times, they're outsiders because of legal and political reasons, even forcibly so. For instance, consider WikiLeaks, which at one point released troves of secret government documents. These documents are part of digital historical records now. Don't quote me on that. But you won't find them in a National Archive catalog. They were published in defiance of official secrecy, and many institutions won't touch such controversial material. Or take Sci-Hub, the guerrilla archive of academic papers that bypasses paywalls. It's essentially an enormous library of scientific knowledge, but it operates in a legal gray zone or black zone, depending on whom you ask. So no formal institution can openly preserve or endorse it. These are examples where significant information is preserved by outsiders and is often excluded from official accounts. There are also communities archives. Think of fan communities archiving old GeoCity web pages from the 90s, or archivists saving social media posts from protest movement that might otherwise be deleted. The outsiders play a crucial role in saving pieces of our digital culture the institutions might overlook or which might vanish by the time institutions get around to noticing. They often work with limited resources and sometimes under threat of legal action. For example, an archive of video game ROMs, essentially copies of old games, provide cultural value by preserving gaming history, but gaming companies may see it as piracy. The existence of outsiders' archives raises an emotional and ethical point: whose stories get preserved and who might be lost. If we rely only on official institutions, we might get a well curated but possibly sanitized version of history. Perhaps the records of governments and mainstream culture, but not the voices of the marginalized or the quirky that actually shape people's daily lives. On the flop side, outsiders' archives might preserve everything they can grab, but without institutional support, they risk being shut down and not being taken seriously as historical sources. There's a tension here, and it makes the world's digital preservation messy, but also vibrant. Now reflect for a moment. Is there some corner of the internet that you love? A niche community, a game, a meme, archive that you worry might disappear one day? If so, you appreciate the same dilemma archivists face: what to save, who should save it, and how to save it. That remains accessible and understandable in the future. Preservation by institutions in the cloud era. Considering everything we've discussed, the pros, the cons of the technology, the deluge of digital data, the personal institutional split, and the outsiders contributors, how are actual institutions like national archives, libraries, universities dealing with their preservation now in the real world? And how is cloud storage a part of that? Firstly, many institutions recognize they can't do it alone anymore. The scale of the digital data is too vast. Remember those zettabytes? Collaboration is key. We see libraries and archives collaborating with tech companies, with each other, and even with the public. For example, the Internet Archive, a nonprofit famously known for the Wayback Machine that archives websites, works alongside university and governments to preserve websites and digital content. This obviously involves cloud infrastructure. This often involves cloud infrastructure. You need distributed servers to hold the entire web worth of snapshots. Similarly, national archives might partner with cloud providers to host copies of their databases, but with contractual assurance for safety. Many institutions are in a phase of experiments and learning. They conduct pilot projects with different cloud setups, maybe a private cloud, them running their own servers on a cloud-like software, or a hybrid model where some of the data is in a public cloud and some of it's kept on a local server. Are working in specialized preservation cloud service. The good news is that the early projects have shown it's feasible to marry cloud technology with the preservation needs if done correctly. As noted in one report, organizations have piloted cloud storage and found ways to overcome major concerns. Integrating cloud into their preservation activities, some use of cloud just for certain tasks, for instance, using cloud servers to perform intensive preservation actions like formatting, migrations, or virus scans, then storing the results back into safer archival storage. Others are already using full-based cloud preservation systems where everything ingest, storage, access is handled online. Other interesting developments in the growth of standard best practices for cloud preservation. Archives are big on the standards like ISO certifications for digital preservation, and they're pushing cloud vendors to meet them. For example, there are now services that promise compliance with the Open Archival Informational System model, a framework for how to manage archive data in the cloud environment. This means the cloud offerings are being tailored to fit archives, not just generic IT needs. This said, the challenges haven't disappeared. Institutionals have to draft robust policies for the cloud use. We will keep 3 copies on 2 different cloud providers and in one in-house. Or we will audit on our cloud vendor annually for security compliance. Many have developed exit strategies. As mentioned, plans for how to pull out of the cloud if needed. It's like having a lifeboat ready. Another crucial aspect is access. Preservation isn't just about hoarding data in a vault, it's about keeping it usable. Cloud platforms can actually help, because if your data is already online, you can more easily build a website or a portal for people to search and view those archives with proper permission. We see this with, say, digital museums where high-resolution scans of paintings are stored in the cloud and delivered to users worldwide. Through web interface, our big data collections like climate data, our genomic data hosted on cloud so researchers access the globe can query them quickly. Cloud storage, in that sense, can democratize access to archives. You don't have to travel to a specific physical archive. You just go to the website. The flip side is ensuring that open access doesn't violate any right. Archives often have to restrict who can see certain records for privacy or copyright reasons. The implementing these controls on cloud storage is another piece of the puzzle. It's an exciting time because everything we're reinventing has how society remembers. We have this mix of traditional wisdom of archivists who have centuries of practice in preserving paper, films, etc., and the cutting edge technology of the cloud, bridging those who require not just technical fixes, but also cultural shifts. Archivists learning new IT skills and tech companies learning the value of preservation, like the fact that data needs to be kept for a very long time and with context. We're seeing a cross-pollination of ideas, conferencing where librarians and cloud engineers share notes. The community is very much aware that this is a new territory. Looking ahead and how we can preserve our digital soul, let's zoom out and get a bit philosophical for a moment. Why does any of this matter? Why pour so much effort into preserving digital data? Whether on the cloud or elsewhere, it matters because memory is identity. For individuals, communities, and humanity as a whole, our memories, records, shift stories and knowledge from a tapestry that tells who we are, where we come from, and perhaps guides where we're going in the analog era. We preserve this with clay tables, books, photos, films, and we built great instructions like libraries and archives. As custodians of culture in the digital era, the responsibility and the mechanisms might have changed, but the essence of the mission to save the evidence of human life and throughout and make sure it doesn't vanish. Despite all the challenges we talked about, technical hurdles, overwhelming data volumes, legal entanglement, and even the risk of misinterpreting reality, there's a strong optimism in the preservation community. It is almost an act of faith, the belief that with ingenuity and collaboration, we can preserve digital knowledge for the long term and make it accessible for everyone. There is a beautiful idealism in that goal. It says that even though digital data seems fleeting, here today on the screen, gone tomorrow, with a deleted account, we refuse to let the story of our time simply evaporate. Future generations deserve more than a black hole of lost websites and unreadable files. They deserve a rich, truthful record of the past and our present. So, how do we get there? Part of it is technological innovation, developing better tools to archive websites, to migrate old file formats to new ones, and detect and correct data corruption. Part of it is policy, pushing for laws and support digital preservation like legal. See,